us today. We'll get into it pretty quickly here. Just want to introduce everybody on here. We have Earl McLeod, who's the executive director of the Building Industry Association. Carl Blackstone, who is president and CEO of the Columbia Chamber. Morris Lyles, who is the South Carolina Association of Realtors incoming president in 2021. Kim Fuller and myself, who are co-executive officers at the Central Carolina Realtors Association. And then we have Councilman Daniel Rickaman of the City of Columbia, who is going to introduce two special guests here that have us, that we're excited to have with us today. So Daniel, I'll let you go.
Great. Good morning, and thank you, Taylor, Earl, Kim, Morris, and Carl for pulling this together. Excited today to have Dr. Goodlogson present this property tax analysis that the City of Columbia had put together and orchestrated so that we could get a good grasp of where we stay and how we can continue to look forward through the windshield and create an opportunity here in Columbia for us to continue to grow and be more competitive in our state. First, I'd like to thank the mayor, city council members, Teresa Wilson, our city manager, and Jeff Palin, our city CFO, for all the hard work that they put into this. This is really a group effort by the city to really take a look and figure out how we can continue to be competitive, what's holding us back. And we've never had a true study with real raw data that gives us an overlook, but leads us to some conclusions and gives us some ability to really move forward. As you know, we struggle with the discussion of taxes, and taxes affect everybody in our community, and in a community where we have everybody from a lot of renters to homeowners, and for years it's been a lot of discussion of why is our tax structure more than others. And I think what we've gotten with this raw data is a real opportunity to see the different tentacles or offsprings of why our taxes are where they are, and then how we can address it as a group. I think this is probably one of the best tools. I can continue, just cannot stop continuing to express my thanks to the mayor and council and the senior staff at the city for really, helping us push this forward and embracing this tool. We have more work to do with it. It's the beginning, but I think the discussion and the more community involvement and the more that we all recognize, hey, we have great opportunities and we've got a tool to use for the first time in a long time, I think is important. With that, I'd like to introduce Mayor Steve Benjamin for some words before I introduce Dr. Goodlogson to present the report.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you and all of our business leaders for pulling together this forum for citizens to get fully engaged in this dialogue, which really needs to be a dialogue. I mean, reality is we have a great deal of talent here across this region, public sector, private sector, philanthropic, and even some of our nonprofits who can contribute to the unique situation that the state capitol often finds itself in, with some systemic challenges. It was important to me to just chime in here. I couldn't agree. Dr. Goodlogson, we vacillate back and forth between Rebecca and Dr. Goodlogson, really dug deep, did her homework to make sure that we were able to illuminate some of the challenges that face us here in the Midlands. I think it's so important that we, however, we spend as much time as we're looking forward at long-term strategies that help us deal with the issues of tax reform that cannot be solved on the local level, that have to be solved on the state level. Our state tax policy has been haphazard at best, but also some short-term strategies that allow us to mobilize locally and feed the need for growth here. We've taken, and I know that Carl and Earl in particular, the rest of you had the displeasure of hearing my rantings more personally over the years, but we've taken our role as a city very seriously. Many of you are pack rats like I am. I ask you to go back and look at your tax bills. We've lowered city tax millage over the last 10 years by more than 12 mils. We've not raised your taxes in the city. We've been diligent about trying to create an environment where capital investment feels welcome, treated right. We just last year got our sixth GFOA Award of Excellence in Financial Reporting in a row. Budget surpluses, 8 of the last 11 years. We've invested nearly $750,000 in infrastructure, real infrastructure, after years of not only transferring money from the Water Sewer Fund, which we stopped under our collective leadership. We've invested heavily in our police department. We more than 90% investment in creating a safe city, things that we're supposed to be doing. And with Daniel's help and leadership, we've cut our not only our pension liabilities, but non-pension related liabilities significantly, literally to the tunes of over $100 million. Your city council is getting it done. Your city's getting it done. We're running this city the way that I think many of you would be proud of as we deal with all the other issues, our other taxing partners and subdivisions, and again, the systemic issues that have to be addressed on the state level. Let's make sure that we focus intently on again, long-term and short-term strategies to help us get there. We can't simply admire the problem. And it's got to be a really thoughtful, pragmatic way forward that helps us solve problems. I do believe that Dr. Knowlton's report gives us that option. We are in some amazingly challenging times, seemingly familiar to many of us. Obviously, we're seeing some wonderful developments in construction. I mean, my neighborhood's on fire right now. It's a wonderful time, but we should expect post-COVID a K-shaped recovery. And watch the recovery be incredibly uneven. So we're going to have to really think about how we not only forecast what we do, but do some real scenario planning as to how we move forward. So all in, thank you for your leadership. I asked everyone to just bring to this the pragmatic problem solving lens as to how we can move forward together, and how we can actually also go to the State House and ask for some real leadership up there as well, legislative, and also the state and our governor. So thank you, Daniel, thank you, Rebecca, and thank you to all of our wonderful business leaders for convening this forum. God bless you, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Mayor. With that, I'd like to turn over the screen to Dr. Gunlogson to present the property tax analysis study that the city commissioned. And once again, I have to just tell everybody that this is a great tool. And I reiterate the mayor's words. This is what we need to use to make our community better. And it really gives us something that we haven't seen in decades. And I can't be more excited that we have this in our tool, and it's going to take us, our state, our school districts, our county friends, a lot of other agencies that are all tied to our property tax to come together for the greater good of the community. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you, and we continue to grow and evolve every aspect of our community. With that, Dr. Gunlogson, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd really like to extend a very deep thanks to the City of Columbia, and the Realtors Association, the Columbia Chamber, and the Builders Association, and everybody else for having me here today. It really is an important topic, and I am genuinely honored to be a part of the discussion. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and hopefully that works and everybody can see that. Okay, so before we begin, I'd really like to give a little bit of background on the study. So coming out of the Great Recession, the U.S. has seen large growth in construction, capital deployment, jobs, and income. But South Carolina in particular has grown more rapidly than the rest of the nation. We've ranked 8th among states in compounded annual GDP growth since then. The City of Columbia, however, has witnessed slower growth than its city counterparts in South Carolina. We have significantly lagged other areas in the state in growth in private firms, growth in private GDP, employment growth, wage growth. We lag in educational attainment both in college and in high school, and in population growth. So if you look here, Richland County with the tan bars, has grown slower than its peer areas. And in fact, the city of Columbia in the blue line has actually witnessed 3 consecutive years of slight population declines. And the makeup of the population is even more important. This shows the number of prime age workers, so people between the age of 25 and 54. They are the ones who are most likely to work and drive GDP. And the Columbia MSA, the whole metropolitan area, has lagged other metropolitan areas in the state, as well as the state average, since 2010. And it's particularly interesting because Columbia has significantly higher percentage of population ages 18 to 24, so those driven by the universities and their associated student population. But the advantage fades out at 25 to 54 age group. And the students aren't staying. And the question is why? And the area's high property tax rates have come to the forefront of discussions behind one of the driving factors between the city or the area's slower growth. And in fact, you can see if you look at combined city, county, and school millage rates, they are indeed significantly higher than other peer cities. 38% higher than Rock Hill, 65% higher than Greenville, 95% higher than Charleston. So the city of Columbia actually set out and commissioned this study to evaluate the property tax rates of the local area and their impact on our property owners, on our economic growth, and the resulting tax revenues. Now, the study itself is 81 pages, and it performs a deep evaluation of a number of state and local property and tax data sets. And particularly, it focuses on why our local rates are so high. So for some time, the driving explanation has been that the city has more exempt property than other areas. For example, properties owned by government, nonprofit, universities, and so forth, which would require a higher tax rate on the remaining taxable properties to generate the same level of revenues. So today, I want to take a look at some of the possible causes of our high property tax rates, and then we're going to go over some solutions to help chart the path forward. So first, a look at causes, and we're going to start right off the bat with the most pressing question: does Columbia have more tax-exempt property than other peer cities? And the short answer is yes, a little bit, but it's not enough to drive such a high tax rate disparity. Now, I want to warn you that when we're comparing this equally, we can't really compare this equally across cities. We end up having a very large apples to oranges component to it. But if we look at the city of Columbia, there are 45,600 some odd parcels within the city limits. 7.8% of them are fully exempt. There's another 16.5% that have some sort of partial exemption. Now, the next thing you see is the listed market value. And I want to put a note about this. State law does not require exempt properties to be appraised. So the Richland County Assessor's Office said that the values on these properties are not accurate. Greenville, whom we got a sample from as well, told me the same thing and said many of their properties just have zero values if they're exempt. And Rock Hill told me the exact same thing, and they did not even include the market value in their sample because it was so inaccurate. Since then, I've also spoken with people in Spartanburg Assessor's Office, and they don't report market values either because they are also either not there or they are inaccurate. So I actually went back and forth on whether or not to include it because it's not correct, but eventually I decided I really preferred to get everything out there and then discuss with everybody the data's shortcomings. So then finally we have the acreage, which totals 35%. Now this does not include Fort Jackson. It's huge, almost 52,000 acres. And while it's in the city limit, it's an independent entity. So the city doesn't provide services to it in the same way it would other parcels. Now, thanks to the city's CFO, Jeff Palin, he, through his contacts, was able to get us some information from both Greenville and Rock Hill. And so you can see, if we just look at the top line of parcels, Greenville has 7.2%, and over here we have Rock Hill at almost 6.8%. You can see the market value, again, at Greenville is 7.8% approximately, and again, not an accurate number, and then Rock Hill did not report that. And then if we look at acreage, they're both right around 25.8% in terms of exempt acreage. Surprisingly, from a national study, from a national standpoint, there really have been few studies on exempt property, and I think most of that may be because every city seems to categorize and assess them slightly differently. We did find one back that Governing did in 2012, and if we look at those, we can see all the cities, all of the South Carolina cities have more exempt parcels as a percentage of total than the national average of 5.5%. So we are all slightly higher. With regards to the value, again, we must say that this is not accurate, but we can see that the average value was right around 25% from the national study. We can look at exempt parcels per person, so per capita. And again, all of the South Carolina cities are above the average. But if we actually look at taxable parcels per capita, all of the South Carolina cities are also slightly above that national average. So what does all of this mean? So one, it is true that Columbia has slightly more exempt parcels and acreage. It also has slightly more taxable parcels nationwide. Ultimately, however, this gap is not significant enough for the exempt properties alone to be driving or be the primary force driving the high property tax rates or driving the difficulty in collecting sufficient tax revenues from property. So we set out to see what might be the other causes of high property taxes. And there's really only 3 other possibilities. So first of all, it could be that the city has high property tax rates due to the fact that we have very little in the way of other revenue sources. And therefore, we rely too heavily on property taxes. And here, actually, the answer is that no, that's really not the case. In fact, the city relies, obviously, the smaller percentage of its total revenues from property taxes in fiscal year 19, just 19.4%. In fact, we rely more on sales taxes, licenses, permits than the other areas. And just for comparison, Charleston received 46.6% of its revenue from property taxes. Greenville was 52.6%, and Rock Hill was 36%. So if we look at revenues per person from just property tax, you can see Columbia and Richland receive far less than any of the other city-county pairs, despite having very high tax rates. So in a manner of speaking, what we are seeing is that Columbia makes up for the lack of property tax revenues through other sources. Now, another possibility might be that Columbia spends more than other cities. And if that was the case, then we would need higher taxes to support that spending. The answer here is a bit, and it's complicated because we have multiple layers of spending and we really have to look by taxing entity. So remember, our taxes are made up of city, county, and school millage rates. And so right here, if we start with schools, we can see here are our per pupil revenues for the 2018-19 school year. And you can see that highlighted in blue were the 3 Columbia school districts, or I'm sorry, the 3 Richland County school districts, and I guess Columbia as well. And you can see the state average highlighted in the tan. So you do see that our school districts do raise more revenue per pupil than the state average. And this dark bar down at the bottom, this is the portion of revenues that are coming from local sources, which is almost entirely from property taxes. Then the next bar, you see those are state revenues, and then the small area at the top are federal, and then the total amount is up at the top. And we see this played out among the millage rates as well. So as you know, I know all of this audience knows, your school millage rate comes in 2 forms. You have that which funds operations, which is all in the brown there, and then that which is used to pay back bond debt to fund construction, which is shown in the blue. And here are our three the three city districts, and you can see that although Richland 2 has the lowest level of revenues per student, they actually have the highest millage rate, which has to do with a large percentage of the property being owner occupied, which do not provide school operations taxes. So, and as a result, millage increases to fund school operations typically fall on other properties, commercial, rental, industry, motor vehicles, etc. And so the smaller the base is, the larger that tax becomes. So ultimately from a school standpoint, we do seem to have higher revenues than the state average. The next thing we can look at is the city and county revenues. And we can see that combined, the city and the county do net higher revenues than the other city county pairs except for Charleston. Now, this is very important that we look at city and county pairs together. Each pair is different in the way they distribute services and cost between each other, as well as among special purpose districts. So you really, it's impossible to look at a city versus city millage rate or a county versus county millage rate. You really have to look at the entire package, city, county, and special purpose district, in order to get a better evaluation. And if we look at sort of the breakout, you can see, again, every city and county does this differently. At the top, we have the municipal rates, then we have the county rates. You have the county rates all broken out, and again, they're very different. Some break out Parks and Recreation separately, some of them roll it up into the general operations. But ultimately, if we look down at the bottom, our combined tax rate is indeed higher. So the other reason that, I guess the final reason that we might have higher property tax rates might be that we have lower property valuations. And if our properties are less valuable, then it requires higher tax rates to generate the same level of revenues. And the answer to this is honestly a resounding yes. So if we look, this first chart shows the total value of all property in the county per person. And Richland's is lower than all of these other peer counties. And so often people will look at this and say, well, this proves we have more exempt property. Otherwise, we'd have a higher value per person. But that doesn't take into account the valuation of each of the properties. So if we actually look at the average value of each property, we see that Richland County, for real property, we generally have less valuable property than the other counties. And if we look at personal property, so cars, boats, and airplanes, that is generally less valuable as well. But I think the most important and compounding issue we face is the fact that the growth in value has been exceptionally slow. If we go back to since 2010, all of the value of property in Richland County has only grown 3.4% versus very, very significant growth for Columbia and Greenville and, for Charleston and Greenville and Lexington and York counties. And we've really seen this trend across most property types. So if, owner-occupied, all owner-occupied value has only grown 2% since 2010 versus very, very large growth on the other counties. If we look at commercial and rental, has a similar but slightly higher rate of growth. Motor vehicles has actually grown at a median pace. Business personal property, which is a direct reflection of firm growth, has been relatively stagnant. We can see utility, railroad pipeline has had some growth. We've seen negative growth in manufacturing, but that is in large part due to the conversion of many, take up of many of the manufacturing properties into fee and lieu or industrial parks or some other sort of tax advantaged designation. And even here, we can see that we have not grown nearly as the other counties have in that designation either. And we actually are able to break it down by owner-occupied and commercial properties. So for owner-occupied properties in Richland County, we can see the units since 2010 have grown at a very slow rate, 3.2% versus the other counties in the sample. And it really varies a lot by school district. So Richland 2 and Lexington 5 gained a pretty significant number of owner-occupied units, while Richland 1 actually lost them as they either converted to commercial or were taken off the tax rolls. The average value actually declined. So the average value of an owner-occupied house has declined since average taxable value of an owner-occupied house has declined since 2010. And that has not happened in the other counties. Have seen this very significant, robust growth here. And then that leads us to total value grown just 1.9% versus, again, very robust growth across the other counties. Now, commercial property tells a similar story. If we look at Richland County, we have a very, very slight decline, which has primarily been led by the decline of units in Richland District 2. It lost 3.9% of its commercial and rental units as they likely converted to owner-occupied and then ceased to be newly developed as commercial properties. Lexington and York are also highly residential counties, and they have also lost a number of commercial units, likely for the same reason. The average value has increased 11.8% across Richland County, but again, that it is far less than what we've seen in the other counties, which then brings your total value still 11.7%. It outpaced just Lexington in terms of total commercial value growth. So I really want to focus on the school districts because there's such a difference between them. So we have a situation where we have many families in Richland County who live in Richland School District 2, but then they work in commercial properties in Richland School District 1. And that is reflected in the pupils or student counts across the district. So we see Richland 1 is losing pupils and Richland 2 is gaining pupils. And this shows since 2010, but the trend goes at least back to 2001, and that's as far back as I have data for. But this goes hand in hand with the significant growth in owner-occupied housing in Richland District 2. At the same time, it is losing commercial property. So the problem with this is that due to Act 388, all of the new owner-occupied homes, which drive new students, actually provide no revenue to support the new growth. Then, as it loses commercial property, as it converts to this owner-occupied property, it causes the school district to actually lose operating revenues from the commercial properties. Conversely, over in Richland 1, which is losing owner-occupied housing, due to Act 388, this conversion to commercial is actually increasing the school operating tax revenue, even if it results in fewer pupils. So essentially, the economic and demographic dynamics that are going on in Richland County are working against each other with regards to the way we finance our school systems. I also want to point out an inflection point that took place in 2014. Here you see the average value of commercial properties actually fell. And the average value of owner-occupied properties actually fell. This was when Richland County underwent its 5-year reassessment. Every county has to reassess all of its properties every 5 years, and Richland's came due in 2014, and it just again occurred in 2019. So I'm going to look at home prices since 2013. This is the Charleston MSA. This is the year-over-year growth in the home price index quarterly since 2013. And you'll see that since 2000, the recovery in Charleston has been pretty consistent and strong since 2013. This is Greenville, also consistent and strong and lagged a little bit. And here is the Colombia MSA. So you can see all the way through the end of 2014, we actually were still in decline. And that's when our reassessment took place. So we really had this perfect storm of unfortunate factors that occurred. We had our 5-year reassessment. It occurred at a time when home prices were still depressed. And Act 388 limits property valuations for tax purposes to 15% over 5 years. So that 2014 reassessment locked in those depressed values, and due to the 15% increase limitation, that can never be fully made up once the market rebound did arrive, and we have 2019, and then every 5 years since that time. So ultimately, all of these factors put us in what I like to call a continuous loop, but we have high property tax rates. That leads to slower growth and poorer property valuations, which in turn lead to smaller tax revenues, which prompt leaders to increase taxes, which further deters growth and depresses valuation. And it goes on and on. And I want to show you how that continuous loop has played out. So if you think about how an area gets its property tax revenues, or how tax revenues can increase, there are 3 ways. First, we could see an increase in housing or commercial units, so new construction, which increases the tax base. Second, we could see an increase in the average property value, so the property becomes more valuable, which produces higher tax revenues. And then third, we could actually see an increase in the tax rates or the millage rates. So if we do a component analysis for commercial and rental properties since 2010, Richland County here highlighted, we see that of the estimated increase in property tax revenues from commercial properties, first of all, the slight decline in units took away from it 0.2%. The 32.5% of the increase was from the increase in the value of property, and 67.7% was from the increase in the tax rates. And you see that far outstrips all of the other areas generated a lot more tax revenues from either growth in units or growth in value rather than growth in rates. And if we see, it's a sort of an even grimmer picture if we look at owner-occupied housing, where the increase in units only accounted for 12.8%, where the decrease in property values took away 5.3%, and leaving 92.5%, which was attributable to an increase in tax rates. Again, if you look at the other areas, they had increase in tax revenues that came from an increased evaluation as well as increased construction. And I think, again, it is a combination of city, county, and school millage rates. So if you break this down by each of the taxing entities, we can look at the beginning millage rate and the ending millage rate. So across cities, Columbia actually has seen a minus 4.4% growth in decline in millage rates, and among counties, Richland has increased faster than all of the counties except York. Over in the school districts, Richland 2, despite losing pupils and gaining commercial properties, still has seen an increase of 14.6%. Richland 2 increased their rates faster than all districts except for Greenville. So that brings us to the point of how do we create the ground or lay the groundwork for future growth, and not just temporary growth that fades away, but growth that's self-sustaining into the future and positively impacts all of our citizens. So what we have here is an outline of 4 steps that we can take to put the area on that path. And they're really not 4 options where you can pick one or the other. They really are all part of the same plan. First, and most importantly, we really need to make our commercial property tax rates competitive. Otherwise, we will keep losing investment or prevent it from happening. The high tax rates are genuinely causing a crisis of disinvestment, which can be seen in our area's declining population, slow income, and slow job growth, as well as our depressed asset valuations. So here is what we would need. Either a 45% reduction is required to be on par with Charleston. I'm not saying that's necessary, but then a 33% would be necessary for to be on par with Greenville, and 18% to be on par with Rock Hill. But most importantly, whatever's implemented really requires a coordinated effort between city and county entities. They really need to come together and jointly agree upon what those targeted tax rates will be, how quick the phase-in period will be, and how it will be structured. What would be the pace of rate reduction over that phase-in period? And the final thing is either a limitation on spending or some identification of other areas of savings during that phase-in period. And there are a couple of possibilities that we have thrown out for how this could be accomplished. So first, one, we could look at creating an exemption just for commercial and rental properties, or those that are assessed at 6%, because those are the properties with the most onerous rates that we are seeing having difficulty and not developing here. Now that would require developing some special county level legislation to phase in property tax exemption for all the 6% properties. It would effectively reduce their assessment rate to say 5% or 4% or some other target. And tax revenues from all the new development could fund further exemption increases. This could be implemented very much in the same way that Act 40 of 2017 effectively reduced the 10.5% manufacturing assessment rate down to 9%, essentially by giving an exemption of 14.28 some odd percent to all property tax manufacturing property owners. And they phased it in gradually over 6 years. Then another possible option would be to create some sort of citywide multi-county industrial park structure with a targeted millage rate, and again, some sort of phase-in over time. I think this one might be a little less optimal because it would be a little more complex in terms of structure and phase-in and coordination among taxing entities. But this is why this is important. So here's what we've been doing in the past to mitigate our very high tax rates. We've been providing large selective tax rates to a few big developers in the hopes that it will encourage follow-on investment and create local jobs and income. And honestly, it is not just us. Our state property tax system is so skewed away from industry that it really encourages all localities to do the same thing. But here is an example of a 50% SSRC granted in Colombia on a sample $40 million property. Now, if we count for city, county, school millages, and the local option sales tax credits, the annual tax on this building is $636,000 versus $1.3 million under the original tax rate. So clearly, the actual tax rate is onerous. I mean, if you break it down, if that's 218, say, for example, residential units, we're talking like a per unit cost of $2,700 versus $5,800. I mean, it is clearly a very onerous tax rate to the point that it would deter investment prior to granting this special tax rate. But the problem with addressing the area's much, much larger tax problem scope with a single one-off tax incentive is, well, first, the discounted tax rates are lower than peer cities, including Charleston. In other words, this particular type of, it might be more generous than competitively necessary. Second, businesses who are eligible for FILOs or MCIPs or SSRCs pay a much higher rate, or actually the businesses who are not eligible for these tax treatments pay a much higher rate. So it drives an unequal treatment of businesses and citizens. And it has both short-term and long-term implications. So it depresses the growth of startups, particularly among smaller and local businesses. The other thing is that job and income creation is not guaranteed. So employment and income vary significantly by industry. So industries like manufacturing and high tech produce numerous high-paying jobs for local residents and a lot of spur-on development. While other industries like housing or student housing do not necessarily do the same thing. And then finally, it is unlikely that large projects with large tax breaks will necessarily attract the desired follow-on projects, because the smaller, newer entrants will face the exact same high tax hurdle that prevented their larger counterparts from developing in the first place. So ultimately, the selective tax breaks for specific developers has not, and likely will not, fuel broad-based continued growth that the city or the area needs. Instead, it will continue to drive a greater imbalance in the tax rates between a few select properties and all others. And while it doesn't deliver on the promise of new jobs and rising wages and increasing future development. So the second point is we really need to coordinate school system finances to make sure that they represent and they support the economic synergies that take place across the region. We have economic and demographic dynamics that are going on in Richland County, which are really honestly working against each other with regards to the way we finance our school systems. We have opposing pupil growth across districts. That is driven by opposing owner-occupied housing and commercial property growth. And finally, both districts actually earn more revenues per peer than the state average, particularly Richland 1 owing to the outsized level of local revenues. So if we don't develop a cooperative financial approach, what we're going to see is a continued acceleration of this commercial and owner-occupied trend and a worsening of the tax environment for both schools and taxable properties in their districts. So the third step is to identify and implement competitive efficiencies. So the depressed revenues from property taxes have made the city and county more reliant on other fees and taxes. And many of these are generally higher than our peers already, and they further increase the cost of doing business and depress investment. So given this limited capacity to increase revenues from other sources, we really need instead to look for other cost-saving measures during the phasing period of implementing these competitive property tax rates. Some options may be conducting a city and county efficiency study to identify opportunities to merge overlapping services or make the provision of services less expensive. Re-examining the city and county operation processes with an eye toward modernization of systems to reduce long-term costs. And then finally, really looking at remodeling our permitting, zoning, licensing processes with urban development best practices that are transparent, that increase taxable parcels and provide a quick and predictable action and encourage growth. If business growth is the goal for the area, then really work toward modeling the processes to assist the businesses and to encourage their development. And then the fourth step is to actively petition the General Assembly. And some people laugh when I say this, but it really is important, because Act 388, while it's not the main driver of the problem, it facilitates it, and its trends are going to intensify over time. So the act that limited property valuation to increases to 15% every 5 years, unless the property is sold, it creates an unequal tax burden among those who have the same type of property. It requires higher millage rates on all of the other property to make up for the lost revenue, and it permanently prevents counties from being able to make up for declines in property values. And that really isn't even to mention the impact that it has on the two school systems. So some options, one, the most likely to happen would be a full repeal of Act 388, which would enable accurate appraisals and a broad-based equalization of school operating taxes across all property types. But more realistic options might include trying to take smaller bites, like a partial repeal of just the 15% valuation limit. Or if not that, maybe even a one-time waiver for accurate appraisal of all properties, and apply the resulting revenue increases to a corresponding millage rate decrease, or in other words, a net revenue neutral situation. And this really is important because right now we have almost 32% of the City of Columbia parcels have a taxable value less than their fair market value, which amounts to about approximately $551 million in market value. And this will get worse as time goes on, and it will eventually discourage land ownership transfers. So all of this might seem like heavy lifts, but they really are all doable. The policies and the phase-in periods can be crafted over, again, a specific set of phase-in periods using tax triggers and data-driven solutions. But the biggest part really is it will take a collaborative and coordinated effort among city and county and school district to develop a solution that promotes sustained economic growth of the region for the future. And that is the presentation. So if there's anybody, I'm happy to take questions or turn it back over to you, Daniel, or
well, Dr. Goodlockson, there are a couple questions on the screen. If you could pull them up and answer that.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll kind of read them out to you.
Okay.
And if you can't answer it, maybe somebody else, if they know. So the first question we had was, I noticed that the number for technical college was below 6%. What did that mean? Does it mean that this is the contribution the city is making towards the technical college?
I'm going to have to remember where that was, where that even was in my presentation.
I wonder if it was in the breakdown on the county taxes on that slide.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see. So, see if I can go back to that slide.
Yeah, she says it was on the data slide.
Yeah, let me pull that back up. So the technical colleges, these are actually just these are the millage rates that are applied to tax bills of all the real and personal property in the county, and so everyone who pays tax 5.7 mils is actually goes to the operations of the technical college.
And then there's another question. Has there been a change in demographics in the school district, and can it be correlated to change in valuation?
So we did not actually evaluate any demographic changes. That would be that actually would be a very interesting study to see if there has been change, but we did not explore that in this particular study. But that does make me actually curious to do a study on that one.
We had some questions that we sent you before.
Okay.
I think.
Yes. Do you want to read them off, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'll just read them off,
okay.
just so the audience hears it. So, Colombia has higher taxes than Charleston or Greenville, but are the taxes covering the exact same things? For example, in Colombia, are garbage, recycling, etc., are included in Colombia? Are the taxes based off of the same services in each city?
So that is a really, really good question and a really good point. And it really hits the nail on the head that each city and county pair delivers a different set of services in a different way. And it's really impossible to judge each individually, like a city versus city or a county versus county. So this study really makes every attempt to compare them together, along with the special purpose districts and the fees that might be outside of the traditional county or city millage. So clearly there might be some omissions, but I think that the overall picture that of the combined pairs is pretty accurate.
Okay. And then we just got another Q&A. So the industries in the county is different in each area. How can the Midlands support and change future industries? What can our school districts, technical schools, and college do to pivot to new industries?
So in terms, of, I guess that's sort of, I think the term is economic gardening, but it's sort of developing your area to bring in different industries. And I think it really is, and again, there's not a single thing. It has to do with the entire infrastructure or the entire ecosystem, which and obviously my bias towards tax policy, but one is making sure that tax policy is such that it supports all of these types of businesses and all of these types of players, so that they all have an opportunity to move forward with that. I do think that making sure that we have a partnership between private industry and government and our tech colleges and our universities to look at ask our business leaders, what are we missing? What do we need? And making sure that we have that connection and developing the programs to facilitate that would be effective as well.
Let's see. So we got another one. I'm particularly interested in how we can retain the prime workforces age 25 to 54 in Colombia. How do you think the tax structure can be changed to guarantee that there is a creation of jobs for this group specifically?
Yeah, I think, it's having the opportunity is what we're talking about here, and I think the study really addresses why we're not seeing that age group thrive here. For example, if in other areas of the state, if you graduate from college or you're in college and you want to develop a startup, it is much cheaper to rent it, either get a building or rent a storefront or start your business there. And developing those aspects to the Columbia metropolitan area to make it more affordable and easier from a zoning, permitting, other process, in order to, again, encourage that type of growth. That's what providing that opportunity would be, not just to that group, but to all workers, but particularly that group.
I got a text message from a listener, was asking about how to download the slides. Is that going to be done through you, Taylor, or can you share those?
Yes. So
somehow?
Yeah, so we're recording this meeting today, so we'll have that posted, and it will be sent to each organization, out to their groups as well. I mean, if Rebecca wants, we could, if she's okay, we could take the slide she used today and we can share that. But I mean, that's up to her. You may not be able to do that. So.
No, absolutely. I'm happy to share this, or I can give a link to the full study and the presentation. I'm happy to give links to all of it. Yes.
Oh, and we should have. We did have when we sent out the invite, we did have a link to the full study, so we'll also include that. Okay.
Rebecca, I know you, unless you have some more questions, Taylor. Every time I see this your presentation, I get more questions, and I appreciate it. A couple of thoughts. I know you mentioned the dangerous inflection point, I guess, of 2014, 2015. So how much of that, I guess, prospectively can we address, again, focusing on solutions to the assessor's office, and obviously recognizing if we have higher assessed values, that probably means higher taxes for folks too. But are there some things that we need to do as we continue to modernize the assessor's office, or some things differently going forward? And secondly, I couldn't agree more. The state for the last 50 years has looked significant at special source, revenue credit and FILOs and the like. And of course, you mentioned specifically the one we've used for modern student housing, and we've had I shared you my thoughts on that. If you look at the parking lot next to the IHOP on Assembly Street, land at Leigh Fallow, paid $15,000 in taxes as a surface parking lot, incentivizing development of $50+ million worth of development there, cutting the taxes by 50% for 10 years, and then going full freight after 10 years, average reduction of 25% to get us a $50+ million tax generator. Doesn't sound like a bad idea to me, particularly as you look at the fact that these new taxes then go to the entire body politic and the provision of services citywide and across Richland School District 1. And the answer to one of the questions earlier is that no, the services provided by every city are not the same. It's different a few different places, but it's tough to reconcile that type of a deal. And we've done probably $250 million worth of them without any significant burdens taken on by the city private sector development. How do we, and so I assume the argument is we should reduce commercial taxes by 48% and just make it across the board, and that would create the environment for the type of investment that we shall see. And I say that as an advocate. I always start to war with some of my other friends. You know, I support consolidation of government. I do. I mean, I think that ought to be on the table as a legislative option, something we should pursue and find a way long term to bring our governments together, and over the course of a number of years dramatically reduce our tax rates. I think we can do a lot more working together in a much more defined way. But I still the tax assessor question is the one that I'm more interested in digging a little deeper in. And then one last point, and since we're recording it, we'll have it for posterity. You know, Smart Asset Magazine is repeatedly cited Colombia as one of the places that actually is retaining millennials in Gen Zers. We came in second to Seattle a couple of years ago, fourth to Seattle and Dallas. I forget who was third the year after that. Our data, your data shows us otherwise, that we aren't retaining those millennials.
So well, I'm specifically using data from the U.S. Census, and I can't speak to, I know Smart Asset is, they are a website that draws people to them to then use, I guess, advertise financial products. And I can't say what their methodologies are, or what data sets that they're using, but ours definitely comes directly from the U.S. Census. So the but I think you really put out a good, point in that, there's no way we're going to solve the tax problem just the city alone. It has to be the city and the county and the schools that come together and are agree to work together to solve the high tax problem. And as a result of that being it's seeming like such a heavy lift to develop that sort of collaboration, cooperation, it does leave us with wanting to do short-term solutions for single parcels, which as opposed to, because it's much harder, it seems, to do a comprehensive solution for all properties and all businesses and all citizens. But yes, I mean, if often we think of the large tax break to the big employer that comes in, and then we see all of this development spurred off of it. And I think one of the best illustrations of that is BMW up in Greenville County, and that has been a huge boom to that economy. But one of the reasons is that all of the startups, the kids that are coming out of college and creating a startup software company, or an automotive supplier that comes in and just locates there, or the guy who wants, or girl, or a family who wants to start a restaurant to serve all of the employees, they face a much lower tax hurdle. It makes their business instantly more attractive, and they are willing to put up the money and put up the time and the effort, because the groundwork has been laid for an easier path. And again, that's something that just the city alone doesn't have control over. It really has to be from the city and the county and the schools together.
Thanks. So we're right here, kind of at the end of our time. But when I ask the mayor and councilman, if you guys want to say any last words or final thoughts.
Daniel, thank you for the answer, Rebecca. No, just thank you all. Let's just get a real dialogue, y'all. This is The reality is that we got to be thoughtful and pragmatic problem solvers. So the things that we can address locally, let's do it. It ain't gonna be easy. The things that we're going to need some help on the state level, let's make sure in a concerted fashion we ask for that type of guidance, and let's just move forward together. But thank you, and thank you, Daniel. All yours.
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time. Thank the mayor for being part of it. I think one of the things that, as the mayor said, we really need to come together as a group and address it. And this isn't pointing the finger at one group or another. It's a collective issue that affects every one of us in the Midlands from every level. And it's a primary local issue. Act 388 makes it very hard for us to address the problem. So it's going to have to involve the state as well. But, we got a lot of special millage groups and everything else that we all need to bring to the table. So I want to thank everybody for bringing this forth. I hope that we can count on y'all to come to the table and join us together to really make a difference for our community, and that we're looking at this long-term with some short-term solutions, but really the long-term solution, so that we have a community that continues to grow in investment. And I think we can do that. I think that we have brought this forth as a tool for us to use as a community, and I encourage everybody to use it that way. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys on behalf of the Columbia Chamber BIA, CCRA. Appreciate you guys being on here. A special thank you to Rebecca for presenting her topic. And we hope to have future meetings like this in 2021. So I'll be on the lookout for that. And yeah, hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.